Welcome to the Sleepy Economist. Tonight, we'll wander together into one of the strangest and most powerful stories ever told, the history of money and how it quietly rules our lives. Every coin, every bill, every number glowing on a screen carries a mystery most people never stop to question. Where did it come from? Why does it hold such power? And what hidden secrets lie behind its rise? So, find a comfortable place, let your body relax, and allow your mind to drift. This is not a lecture, it's a calm journey, a story told softly, meant to stir your curiosity while helping you unwind. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let's begin. Money is everywhere around us, yet so few people stop to wonder what it really island. You hold a coin in your hand, and you feel the cold metal. You see the imprint of authority on its surface, perhaps the face of a leader or a national symbol, and you know instantly that this piece of metal has value. But why? Why should a simple disc of copper, silver, or nickel rule your life, decide what you can or cannot have, and even shape the destiny of entire nations? Tonight we will wander slowly and calmly through the strange history of money, a history that is both familiar and mysterious, ordinary and yet powerful enough to dominate human existence. Let these words accompany you like a quiet voice in the dark, a voice telling you that the money you use every day is part of a tale that stretches back thousands of years. Imagine yourself in a time before coins, before paper, before banks and credit cards. Life was simple, or at least it seemed that way. People traded what they had for what they needed. A farmer with too much grain might exchange a sack of it for a neighbor's goats. A potter with jars and bowls might swap them for wool from the shepherd. It was a system that worked, but it was also clumsy. What if the shepherd didn't need pots at that moment? What if the farmer wanted something that could not be easily divided, like half a cow? The old world was filled with these little frictions, these moments when trade became tangled in the problem of matching one desire with another. And so, slowly, the idea of something easier began to form. People wanted a universal measure, a way to compare value without endless negotiation. In some places, shells were chosen. Bright, polished shells that were rare enough to be precious, yet small and light enough to carry. In other places, beads or pieces of metal were used. Gold and silver glimmered in the sun, and their beauty made people believe they held special power. At first, these were just objects of exchange, but gradually, they became symbols of trust. When you accepted a piece of gold in return for your goats, you knew you could later give that gold to someone else and receive bread, clothes, or tools. Slowly, silently, money was born. Picture the first coins, hammered by hand, marked with the sign of a king or a city. Each carried not only weight, but authority. The face on the coin said, in effect, "Trust this." The community agreed to honor its value because behind the coin stood armies, temples, and governments. From the very beginning, money was not only about trade, but about power. The leaders who minted coins declared themselves masters not just of territory, but of value itself. Every coin whispered, "This ruler commands not only soldiers, but also the very language of exchange." Centuries passed, and coins traveled along dusty roads and across seas. They clinked in the pouches of merchants, in the strong boxes of soldiers, in the hands of beggars. Money became a traveler, moving faster than any person, telling stories of distant lands. When Roman coins appeared in far-off villages, people knew they were touching the power of Rome itself. And yet, behind the shine, there was always something strange. The coin itself was just metal, but because people trusted it, it ruled their lives. That is the secret of money. Its power does not come from what it is, but from what we believe it to be. Now, close your eyes and imagine a Roman marketplace. The air is filled with the cries of merchants selling wine, olives, cloth, and jewelry. The smell of bread drifts from a nearby oven. In your hand, a small coin rests, stamped with the profile of an emperor. You pass it to a baker, and he gives you a loaf. The loaf feeds your body. The coin is gone, yet its power continues in the baker's hand. He will use it to buy flour from the miller, who will pass it to the farmer, who will spend it on tools from the blacksmith. That one coin, silent and small, creates a chain of life, a circle of trust, a never-ending dance of exchange. But even in those days, money was never just neutral. Leaders realized that by controlling the coin, they controlled the people. They shaved the edges off coins to gather the metal. They mixed in cheaper alloys so that the gold and silver stretched further. And though the coins looked the same, their value slowly melted away. People grumbled as their savings bought less. Markets shook as trust wavered. Already, in the ancient world, money carried both promise and danger, both opportunity and deception. Fast forward through centuries, and you see this pattern repeat. Every society that touched money also touched temptation. Kings and emperors wanted more coins than they had treasure, so they created illusions of wealth, and people, often unaware, paid the price. You might think this is distant history, but the truth is that it has never really ended. Even today, money is stretched, reshaped, reinvented, and its true worth is always a question hanging in the air. Think now about paper. For thousands of years, money was metal, heavy and solid, something you could drop and hear clatter on the floor. But then, in ancient China, something remarkable began. Merchants grew tired of carrying heavy coins over long distances. Imagine hauling bags of copper or silver across mountains and rivers. It was exhausting and dangerous. So instead, they began to write notes, pieces of paper that promised payment later. At first, these were simple agreements, but soon, local governments saw the potential. They printed official notes, backed by their authority. Suddenly, value was not a lump of metal, but words on a fragile sheet of paper. At first, people hesitated. How could thin paper be worth more than heavy gold? But over time, trust grew. The paper was lighter, easier, faster. A single scroll could represent a fortune. And so, the age of paper money began. It spread slowly at first, then rapidly, until it crossed continents. In Europe, banks and rulers adopted the idea, printing notes with elegant designs, promising that each could be exchanged for silver or gold, kept safe in a vault. For a while, the system worked. The paper was only a sign, a promise. People believed in the promise, and so the paper ruled their lives. Pause here and reflect. Imagine holding one of those early banknotes, crisp and strange, with ink curling across its surface. You know you cannot eat it, wear it, or build a house with it. And yet, with it, you can buy food, clothes, and shelter. The paper is worthless in itself, but priceless in its meaning. That paradox sits at the heart of money. It is both everything and nothing. It is power wrapped in illusion. As centuries passed, banks grew. They no longer just stored coins and notes. They began to create money themselves. When they lent, they promised more than they had, knowing that not everyone would demand repayment at once. In that quiet act, money multiplied. Invisible wealth was born out of signatures and agreements. People signed contracts, debts were created, and with them, new money entered the world. This expansion gave energy to economies, fueling trade and growth. But it also created fragility. When trust broke, the illusion cracked, and entire nations trembled. The story of money is not just economic, it is deeply human. Think of the farmer, who wonders if he should trust a banknote. When paper money began to circulate more widely, people slowly adjusted to the idea that value could be written rather than minted. They learned to trust not the weight of a coin, but the promise behind a symbol. Yet trust is a fragile thing. Imagine living in a small European town in the 17th century, when rumors began to spread that a local bank had issued more notes than it could possibly redeem. People rushed to the bank, demanding gold or silver in exchange, and the clerks at the counter quickly realized they could not fulfill every request. Fear rippled through the crowd. Fear spread through the streets, and suddenly the paper that yesterday bought bread and wine seemed like worthless scraps. This panic was called a run on the bank, and it became one of the strangest features of the new world of money. When people believed in it, the paper was wealth. When they doubted, it was nothing. The difference between fortune and ruin was not material, it was psychological. The power of belief gave money both its strength and its danger. Leaders understood this, and they tried to anchor trust with symbols of authority. They printed royal crests, images of monarchs, seals of governments. They built grand buildings to house their banks, with stone columns and heavy doors that conveyed permanence. The message was clear: trust us, your money is safe. And yet, beneath those walls, money was no longer just a reflection of gold or silver. It was becoming something else entirely. It was becoming an idea, elastic, stretching further than any physical reserve could match. Imagine walking through London in the 18th century, the fog thick in the streets, carriages rattling over cobblestones. A pamphlet blows across the road, announcing the promise of a new joint stock company. Investors gather in coffee houses, speaking in excited tones about fortunes to be made. They exchange shares, printed slips of paper, each one a promise of wealth in ventures across the seas. Some are real, some are illusions, and in the frenzy, few can tell the difference. Soon, bubbles swell, expectations rise, and when reality fails to match the dream, the bubble bursts. Money vanishes like mist, and lives are shattered. These cycles of hope and collapse repeat again and again, as though money carries within it not only the possibility of growth, but also the seeds of disappointment. Think of the South Sea bubble, when promises of trade and riches intoxicated investors in Britain, only to collapse into ruin. Think of tulip mania in the Netherlands, when flowers became more valuable than houses, until suddenly they were worth less than a sack of onions. Each story reminds us that money, strange and elusive, can hypnotize entire populations. People chase it, worship it, and sometimes destroy themselves in the pursuit. And yet, through it all, the idea of money never fades. It survives every collapse, every crisis, because even when illusions break, the need for exchange, the need for trust, remains. As centuries moved forward, governments sought more control. They realized that if they could manage money, they could manage economies, armies, and empires. Central banks were created, institutions that stood above individual lenders, claiming the power to issue money for entire nations. The Bank of England, founded in the 17th century, became a model. It issued notes, stabilized debts, financed wars. Soon, other countries followed. These banks were not just financial houses. They were pillars of political power. Through them, money became not just a tool of trade, but an instrument of statecraft. Imagine a war being fought far from home. Armies march, cannons roar, supplies are needed, but the gold in the treasury is not enough. Without money, the war cannot continue. And so the government issues bonds, promises to pay later, printed documents bought by citizens and investors. These bonds fund the war, keeping soldiers fed and armed. In this way, money stretches again, pulled forward from the future into the present. And when the war ends, debts remain, chains of obligation that shape the politics of generations. The strange history of money is also the history of promises that echo long after the battles are over. Now picture the 19th century, trains racing across landscapes, factories churning with smoke, cities swelling with people. The modern economy begins to roar. Banks lend, businesses grow, wages are paid in notes that pass from hand to hand. People line up at counters to deposit their savings, trusting the clerk behind the desk. But always there is the shadow of uncertainty. Somewhere a bank fails. Somewhere fortunes vanish overnight. And yet people return again and again because they need money, because without it they cannot eat, cannot live, cannot dream. In those years, money began to take on a new character. It was not only a symbol of trade, it was becoming a measure of identity. A man was judged by his wealth, a family by its fortune, a nation by its reserves. Newspapers printed lists of millionaires, novels told tales of riches gained and lost, songs celebrated wealth and mocked poverty. Money became more than a tool. It became a mirror in which society saw itself. And in that mirror, people sometimes saw beauty, sometimes ugliness, but always power. Reflect for a moment. Consider how strange it is that small pieces of paper could decide the fate of empires. They fueled colonial ventures, they built railroads, they toppled governments. Yet those pieces of paper were fragile, vulnerable to fire, to water, to doubt. Their true strength lay only in the collective agreement that they mattered. If belief cracked, if people stopped trusting, the entire edifice could crumble. And so leaders worked tirelessly to protect that belief, to cultivate it, to persuade their citizens that money was solid, reliable, eternal. But deep down, they knew, and perhaps you now sense, that money has always been smoke held together by trust. As the 20th century dawned, the world faced upheaval. Wars unlike any before erupted, consuming entire continents. Money was once again stretched beyond recognition. Governments printed more notes, more bonds, more promises. Inflation soared, coins vanished, people carried wheelbarrows of paper to buy bread. In Germany, after the First World War, hyperinflation turned savings into dust. Imagine working for years, carefully storing banknotes, only to find one morning that your entire fortune could not buy a loaf of bread. The pain of that moment, the disbelief, the despair, lingers even now in history. It shows how money, so powerful, can also be terrifyingly fragile. But the story did not end there. From the ashes of crises, new systems arose. Gold was tied to currencies, then untied, then tied again. The dollar rose to global dominance, becoming the anchor of international trade. Money now flowed across oceans at speeds once unimaginable. It powered reconstruction, development, globalization. Yet with every expansion came new questions. What truly gives money its value? Is it the metal behind it, the authority of governments, or simply the faith of those who use it? And here, as the night deepens and this story stretches on, consider how the strange history of money is also the history of us. Our hopes, our fears, our greed, and our dreams are all written into the fabric of coins, notes, and digital balances. Every time we hand over money, we are not only making a trade, we are participating in a legacy that reaches back thousands of years. The food on the table, the roof above our heads, the warmth in our homes, each is tied to that legacy. As you breathe slowly and let your thoughts drift, remember this: money is strange because it is both invisible and undeniable. You cannot touch its essence, only its symbols. You cannot eat it, yet it feeds you. You cannot wear it, yet it clothes you. It is nothing more than trust, yet it is strong enough to shape nations. And as this story continues, we will wander further into its mysteries, uncovering how this invisible force has ruled lives, toppled empires, and continues, even now, to whisper quietly in the background of your own life. The 20th century moved forward with a rhythm of expansion and collapse, of hope and fear. And through it all, money remained at the center of human life. Think of the Great Depression in the 1930 seconds, when millions of people found themselves without work, without homes, without security. Banks closed their doors, savings vanished. Lines of desperate men and women stretched through the streets. The strange truth was that the money itself had not disappeared. The farms still grew wheat, the factories still stood, the people still had skills and hands and ideas. Yet because trust in money and markets had collapsed, the entire system froze. Bread was locked behind glass, goods waited on shelves, but without money, they were unreachable. That is the strange cruelty of money. It can open doors or slam them shut, not because of physical reality, but because of collective belief. From that crisis emerged new institutions, new rules meant to stabilize the fragile heart of finance. Governments stepped in to guarantee deposits, to regulate banks, to manage interest rates. Slowly, confidence returned, and with it, economies revived. Yet even as leaders built safeguards, the pattern remained. Boom and bust, faith and fear, expansion and collapse. These rhythms are as old as money itself. Then came the Second World War, and money was again weaponized. Nations printed enormous amounts to fuel the war effort. Afterward, leaders gathered to design a new system, one that might prevent chaos in the future. They created agreements to stabilize currencies, to tie them to the US dollar, and to tie the dollar itself to gold. For a time, it worked. The world believed in the promise, and trade flourished. But eventually, the system strained. In 1971, the link between the dollar and gold was broken, and once again money slipped free from its anchor, floating on the tides of belief. Now, money was truly strange, because it no longer had any direct tie to metal or tangible reserves. It became what economists call fiat currency, money declared valuable by government decree. Valuable because we all agree it is, valuable because we accept it in exchange. A dollar, a pound, a yen, each is a piece of paper or a number on a screen, backed not by gold, but by trust in the issuing authority. If that trust fails, the value melts. If that trust holds, the value persists. Consider how strange it is that today, trillions of dollars move around the globe with the click of a button. No gold changes hands, no silver crosses oceans. Instead, computers shift numbers between accounts. With each click, wealth is created, transferred, or destroyed. Invisible streams of value flow like digital rivers, shaping markets, nations, and lives. And yet, behind the screens, the same old truth remains. Money exists because we believe it does. Think of a simple example. You wake in the morning and open your banking app. You see numbers on a glowing screen. Those numbers are not piles of coins in a vault. They are not even stacks of paper. They are records, symbols, digital reflections of promises. You trust that if you swipe your card, groceries will be given to you. You trust that if you send a payment, it will reach its destination. The grocery store, the landlord, the electric company, they all trust the same. If that trust vanished, the numbers would mean nothing. Yet because we all share the belief, the numbers rule our lives. This new world of money, detached from physical anchors, gave governments enormous power. They could print more, spend more, stimulate economies, manage recessions, but it also created dangers. Inflation could erode savings, currencies could collapse under mismanagement, and once again, ordinary people paid the price. A retiree sees the value of a pension shrink. A family finds groceries more expensive every week. The strange history of money continues to touch the most intimate corners of daily life. Reflect on how money is now both everywhere and nowhere. You hold some in your pocket, perhaps a few notes or coins, but most of it exists only as digits in databases. It flows through invisible networks, faster than light, touching banks, markets, corporations, and households. And even as it becomes more abstract, its grip on us tightens. We plan our futures around it, we measure our worth by it, we dream and worry about it. Pause and let that thought sink in. Money is not real in the way a tree or a mountain is real, yet it shapes reality more than almost anything else. Wars are fought over it, families break apart over it, people sacrifice their health and time for it. That is the paradox that makes its history so compelling and so unsettling. As you rest and listen, imagine the faces of those who have ruled money, bankers in tall buildings, their desks piled with ledgers, politicians signing laws that shift billions with a stroke of a pen, economists writing theories trying to tame this strange beast. And imagine also the ordinary people, the shopkeeper, the factory worker, the teacher, the farmer, each one ruled by money's hidden hand, each one adjusting life to its rhythms. From the highest palaces to the humblest huts, money whispers the same command: obey me, or life will be hard. But money is not only a chain, it is also a tool. It has built bridges, funded hospitals, supported artists, fueled inventions. Think of the discoveries financed by wealth, electricity, medicine, technology. Without money as a way to gather resources, many of these wonders would not exist. In this sense, money is not evil or good, it is a force. Like fire. Fire can warm a home or burn it to the ground. Money can create comfort or destruction. It all depends on how it is used and who controls it. Now imagine the rise of credit cards in the mid-20th century. A small piece of plastic slipped into wallets, promising convenience. No longer did people need to carry thick wads of cash. A simple swipe and the purchase was complete. Behind that swipe lay complex networks of banks and processors, charging interest, creating profits. With credit, people could buy today what they might only afford tomorrow. Debt became a way of life, normal, even celebrated. Yet debt is a double-edged sword. It fuels dreams, but it can also enslave. Quietly, money extends its reach, binding people not only through coins and notes, but through invisible obligations. Consider how debt has shaped history. Nations borrow to build roads, to fight wars, to fund welfare. Companies borrow to expand, to innovate, to dominate markets. Families borrow to buy homes, to pay for education, to cover emergencies. Each loan is a promise. Each promise creates new money. Each repayment feeds the system. And so, debt is not just a burden, it is also a creator. It is one of the strangest paradoxes. By owing, we grow. By promising, we create. But if promises break, collapse follows. Look at the financial crises of recent decades. The housing bubble in the United States, built on layers of debt and speculation. When it burst, millions lost homes, jobs, savings. The crisis spread across the globe, a reminder that in a world of interconnected money, a crack in one place can echo everywhere. Behind the numbers were lives, dreams shattered, futures altered. Money, invisible and untouchable, had again shown its power to rule and to ruin. And yet, even after such crises, people return to money. They save again, invest again, work again. Why? Because they must. Money is not optional in our world. It is the current in which we all swim. And perhaps this is the strangest part of its history. No matter how many times it fails, no matter how often it betrays, we always return. We cannot imagine life without it, and so we forgive its betrayals and trust once more. As you reflect on this, let your mind wander gently. Think of the coins in your pocket, the notes in your wallet, the numbers in your account. Each one is part of a story older than empires, older than many religions, a story that continues today. You are part of it, whether you wish to be or not, and as the story unfolds, it carries you with it, just as it has carried billions before you. The strange history of money is not over. It never will be, because money evolves as we do. It takes new forms, adapts to new needs, follows us into new worlds. From shells to coins, from paper to plastic, from digital balances to invisible algorithms, money changes, but its essence remains. Trust, belief, illusion, power. And as you let these words guide you deeper into rest, remember that you are living within this story right now. Every purchase, every paycheck, every decision about saving or spending is another line written in the ongoing tale of money's rule over our lives. As the story of money moves closer to our own time, it becomes even stranger, more abstract, and more entangled with daily life. Think for a moment about how ordinary it feels to use money every day, and yet how extraordinary it truly island. You go to a store, place items in a basket, and hand over a card or your phone. The cashier accepts it, confident that the invisible signal sent across networks will deliver value. You walk out with goods in your hands, having exchanged nothing physical, only an invisible flow of digits. This is magic, and yet it is so common we hardly notice it. Money has always been a kind of shared illusion, but in our era, it has become pure imagination wrapped in technology. Pause to consider how the system rests entirely on trust. When you transfer money online, you never see it move. No bags of coins cross the street. No paper changes hands. What you see is a number decrease in your account and a number increase in someone else's. That is all. And yet, you and everyone else act as though something real has been exchanged. We have built vast systems, powerful companies, and entire economies on this invisible ritual. Without trust, it collapses. With trust, it flourishes. Think of the rise of global finance in the late 20th century. Money no longer stayed within borders. It began to circle the globe at breathtaking speed. Investors in one country bought bonds in another. Corporations shifted profits across continents. Governments borrowed from foreign markets. A decision made in Tokyo could ripple into New York. A collapse in one region could trigger panic in another. The world became a web of money, delicate, shimmering, and fragile. Through all this, ordinary people continued their daily rituals, working for pay, saving for the future, spending for comfort. Behind their simple acts stretched vast networks of complexity. A paycheck deposited in a small town might be tied to global investments, pension funds, and international markets. A loan for a house might be bundled into securities, sold to distant investors, turned into numbers on screens continents away. Money binds us all into a single system, whether we know it or not. And in this system, stories repeat. There is always a new bubble, a new crash, a new invention that promises to change everything. Yet the core remains the same. Money is trust and belief, circulating endlessly, shaping our choices. Now, think of the digital revolution. Computers and the internet reshaped money in ways earlier generations could hardly imagine. Online banking, credit cards, and then mobile payments made transactions instantaneous. People began to check balances on glowing screens rather than visiting bank branches. Salaries arrived by direct deposit, bills were paid automatically, purchases happened with a click. The physical connection to money faded further. Coins and notes still exist, but more and more we live in a world of invisible digits. With this shift came new possibilities and new risks. Cyber theft, fraud, and hacking became threats, shadows lurking in the digital vaults. And yet the system kept expanding because the convenience was irresistible. Who would go back to carrying heavy bags of coins or waiting in long lines when with one tap you can move value across the world? The strange history of money, once marked by metal and paper, is now marked by passwords and encryption. Reflect on how deeply money rules your life even now. Think of the way you plan your day. Perhaps you wake early to go to work because you need money. You decide what to eat based on prices. You think about the future, saving for education, for a home, for old age. Each thought, each plan is shaped by money's presence. It sits quietly in the background of every decision, and yet if you tried to hold it in your hand, you could not. You can hold coins, yes, but they are a tiny fraction of what money now island. The rest exists only in imagination, in trust, in records. Consider the psychological weight of money. It brings comfort when it is abundant, anxiety when it is scarce. It can make people feel secure or trapped, free or enslaved. Couples argue over it. Families break apart. Friendships are tested. Dreams are built upon it, and lives are sometimes destroyed in its pursuit. And yet, we cannot walk away from it. To live in society is to live with money. It is the air of the modern world, invisible but inescapable. Now imagine yourself as a traveler through time, moving across centuries, watching money change. You see shells exchanged on a beach. You see silver coins stamped with emperors' faces. You see crisp paper notes carrying promises. You see glowing screens with digital balances. And through it all, you notice the same thread: trust. Always trust. People trusting objects, people trusting paper, people trusting banks, people trusting screens. Without trust, nothing works. With it, everything flows. And here lies the deepest strangeness. Money is not a natural element. It is not born of the earth like stone or water. It is a creation of the human mind, a shared story told by billions. We agree to believe, and so it exists. Stop believing, and it vanishes. This is why money is both powerful and fragile, both eternal and fleeting. As the night deepens and you listen to these words, perhaps you feel yourself drifting into a softer state, where thoughts become lighter, where worries fade. Let the story carry you gently. Imagine yourself holding a coin, feeling its weight. Imagine watching it change shape into a note, then into a card, then into a number on a screen, then into pure light. Each transformation is part of the same story, the story of money ruling lives through belief. Think again about how it rules yours. The work you do, the choices you make, the dreams you chase, all are shaped by it. Yet by seeing it clearly, by understanding its strangeness, you may also find a kind of freedom. You realize that money is not magic, it is trust. It is not destiny, it is agreement. And while you must live within its system, you can also choose how to relate to it, how much power to give it over your heart. The strange history of money is not only about economies and governments, it is about you, your wallet, your bank account, your decisions. It is about the nights you stay awake worrying about bills and the mornings you feel relief when payment arrives. It is about the dreams you hold for the future, the sacrifices you make, the paths you follow. Money is both the background and the foreground of life, a quiet ruler that touches every corner. And as this first part of the story comes to a close, let the thought settle gently. Money is not solid, not tangible, not eternal. It is a story we tell together, a story that has shaped our past and will shape our future. When you next touch a coin or glance at a balance, remember the centuries behind it, the lives woven into it, the trust it represents. Remember that you are part of this ongoing tale, a tale that began long before you and will continue long after. Breathe slowly, let the words fade into the rhythm of your breath, and know that this is only the beginning. The story of money stretches onward, into deeper mysteries, into stranger chapters. And soon, as we continue, we will see how paper gave way to promises, how promises gave way to crises, and how each crisis revealed the fragile, powerful truth of money. For now, rest in the knowledge that you have touched the surface of a tale that rules your life quietly, invisibly, endlessly. And as you close your eyes, remember, money is nothing, and yet it is everything. The story of money does not stop at coins or paper, nor at the early banks that learned to stretch promises into the future. As time moved forward, money seeped into every corner of life, becoming not just a medium of exchange, but the invisible skeleton holding up entire civilizations. Imagine yourself walking into a 19th century city, smoke rising from factory chimneys, the sound of iron wheels grinding on rails, the chatter of crowds in the marketplace. Behind every noise, behind every movement, money whispers. It fuels the factories, it pays the wages, it guides the flow of goods along the new train lines. Without it, the city would fall silent. Debt became the quiet engine of this new world. Nations borrowed to build roads, to fund armies, to dig canals that would reshape landscapes. Ordinary families borrowed to buy homes, to invest in farms, to start small businesses. With every loan, new money was created, invisible wealth called into existence by nothing more than trust and signatures, promises piled upon promises, and the system expanded like a balloon. Most of the time, it worked, bringing growth and comfort. But sometimes the balloon burst, and then the world remembered how fragile trust could be. Think of the Panic of 1873, when railroads built on mountains of debt collapsed, dragging banks and investors down with them. Think of the long depressions that followed, when unemployment spread and hope shrank. Through it all, the lesson was repeated. Money could build dreams, but money could also destroy them. It was not the metal or paper itself that created chaos. It was the belief, the trust, the web of promises stretched too thin. And yet, societies always came back. People rebuilt banks. They returned to markets. They borrowed again. They lent again. Why? Because life demanded it. Crops still had to be planted. Houses still had to be built. Trade still had to flow. Money was too deeply woven into the fabric of life to abandon. It was not optional. And so, again and again, humanity forgave money's betrayals and walked back into its embrace. By the 20th century, money had become both more powerful and more strange than ever. The First World War was fought not only with bullets and tanks, but with bonds and banknotes. Governments printed more and more, borrowing from the future to survive the present. And when the war ended, the debts lingered, shaping the politics of generations. In Germany, hyperinflation exploded, turning savings into dust. Families carried wheelbarrows of notes to buy bread. Workers were paid twice a day, rushing to spend wages before prices doubled by evening. The paper was covered in ink, numbers spiraled into absurdity, and yet it could buy nothing. That nightmare revealed money's most frightening secret. When belief collapses, value disappears. But even out of disaster, systems are reborn. New agreements tied currencies to gold, trying to anchor trust once more. For a time, stability returned, trade revived, economies grew. But wars came again, and once more money was stretched, reshaped, reinvented. After the Second World War, leaders gathered to design a new system at Bretton Woods. They agreed to tie global currencies to the US dollar, and the dollar to gold. For decades, this system provided structure. The dollar became the beating heart of world trade, trusted everywhere. But eventually, the weight of promises grew too heavy. In 1971, the link was severed. The dollar floated free, and with it, the world entered a new era of money without anchors. Money defined only by decree and belief. This was fiat money, declared valuable because governments said it was, accepted because societies agreed it was. A piece of paper or a digital number no longer represented gold locked in a vault. It represented trust in authority, trust in systems, trust in each other. If that trust held, economies thrived. If it cracked, crises erupted. Pause for a moment and think of how strange this island. You work long hours, you trade your time, your energy, your creativity. In return, you are given numbers on a screen or pieces of paper with symbols. Those symbols are not backed by metal or jewels, they are backed by nothing you can touch. Yet you accept them. Your landlord accepts them. Your grocery store accepts them. The whole world turns on this fragile, invisible agreement. And it works most of the time. With fiat money came new powers for governments and central banks. They could expand supply in times of crisis, inject liquidity into markets, stimulate economies with the stroke of a pen. This flexibility saved nations from deeper depressions, but it also introduced new dangers. Inflation could rise, savings could melt, currencies could collapse under mismanagement. Ordinary people felt it in their daily lives. Prices creeping higher, pensions losing value, dreams slipping further away. Money's strangeness was no longer distant history. It was lived reality. Consider the 1,970 seconds when oil shocks and inflation shook economies. Prices doubled, tripled. Wages lagged, and people discovered that the money in their pockets bought less each week. Anger grew, uncertainty spread. It was not a famine of goods. Food was still grown, cars still built, clothes still sewn. It was a famine of trust, a reminder that money itself could weaken, even while the real world remained. Out of this turbulence rose the dominance of the US dollar as the global reserve currency. Nations traded in it, debts were issued in it, savings stored in it. It became not just American money, but world money. To this day, when crises strike, people rush into dollars, trusting that somehow, despite its own flaws, it will hold value. That trust has given the United States immense power, the ability to borrow cheaply, to influence markets everywhere. Money, once local, had become a global empire. Meanwhile, for ordinary people, money became more invisible. Credit cards spread through the 1,950 seconds and 1,960 seconds. Tiny plastic rectangles carrying vast power. A simple swipe could purchase food, clothes, vacations, even dreams. Behind the swipe lay networks of banks, processors, and interest rates. Debt became normal, even celebrated. People bought today what they could only afford tomorrow, binding themselves with invisible chains of obligation. Some prospered, using credit to build businesses, to invest in education, to climb ladders. Others sank, trapped in cycles of interest and repayment. Money was no longer just in pockets or purses. It was in promises stretching years into the future. Reflect on how debt has become part of ordinary life. Families take out mortgages for decades, repaying slowly, often more than double what they borrowed. Students take loans to buy education, carrying burdens into their futures. Governments run deficits year after year, piling obligations onto generations not yet born. Everywhere, promises upon promises weave a web of trust. The web holds until it doesn't. And when it breaks, panic spreads like wildfire. Think of the financial crisis of 2008. Housing markets built on fragile debt collapsed, banks failed, markets trembled. Millions lost homes, jobs, savings. The system wobbled on the edge of collapse, saved only by extraordinary measures from governments and central banks. Once again, the lesson was revealed. Money is not solid, it is belief. When belief cracks, the world shudders. And yet, slowly, painfully, trust is rebuilt, and the system continues. Because it must. Because money is not optional. As you breathe and let these thoughts sink in, consider the rhythm of this story. It is a cycle, always repeating. Trust, expansion, crisis, collapse, recovery. Each generation believes it has learned the lessons of the past, and yet each generation repeats them. Perhaps this is not a flaw of money, but a reflection of ourselves. Human hope and human fear, human greed and human caution are written into the very fabric of finance. Money is not only an economic system, it is a mirror of humanity itself. Now imagine the rise of technology in the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Computers, networks, and mobile devices transformed money yet again. Online banking, instant transfers, digital wallets, contactless payments. You tap your phone and a transaction happens across the world in seconds. No coins, no paper, no visible exchange. Pure trust, pure belief, pure illusion, wrapped in convenience. And as technology advanced, new forms of money emerged. Cryptocurrencies, decentralized digital coins, promised freedom from governments and banks. They offered a vision of money without central authority, a system of trust based on mathematics and code rather than institutions. Some hailed it as a revolution, others as a dangerous illusion. Prices soared, fortunes were made, bubbles inflated, then crashes came, wiping out wealth in an instant. And yet, the idea remains, lingering in the air. Maybe money can exist outside the old systems. Maybe it can be reinvented once more. Pause and reflect. Throughout history, every time money has changed form, people doubted, resisted, feared. Shells to metal, metal to paper, paper to plastic, plastic to digits, digits to algorithms. Each step felt unnatural until it became normal. And now, as digital money spreads, as cryptocurrencies experiment, we are living in the same story again. The strange history of money is not a closed book. It is being written around you every day. Think of how it shapes your own choices even now. You may wonder about saving, about investing, about protecting yourself from inflation. You may dream of wealth, of freedom, of security. And always, behind those dreams, stands money. It is the gatekeeper to your future, the silent ruler of your plans. And though it is nothing but belief, you cannot escape it. None of us can. As this part of the story draws toward a pause, let your mind drift gently on the realization that money is both fragile and indestructible. It collapses, yet it returns. It betrays, yet it is forgiven. It vanishes, yet it rules again. It is a story told not once, but endlessly, written by every generation. And you, here tonight, are part of that endless story. With every coin you touch, every card you swipe, every number you read on a glowing screen, you write another line in the strange history of money and why it rules your life. Money's strange history keeps unfolding, and as we step deeper into its pathways, we find that it shapes not only economies, but the inner world of human beings. Money does not merely buy goods or services. It buys confidence. It buys time. It buys possibilities. At the same time, it fuels anxiety, comparison, and desire. It is invisible, yet it sits heavy on every heart. As we drift through this story, let us wander into the ways money has quietly ruled not only nations, but the private corners of life. Imagine a small family sitting around a wooden table, a single candle burning in the darkness. The father counts coins slowly, carefully, deciding what can be bought, what must wait. The children watch, sensing the tension even if they do not fully understand. This scene has been repeated countless times across centuries, in cottages, in huts, in apartments, in houses. Money creates moments of closeness, but also of fear. It turns family conversations into negotiations, dreams into calculations. That is one of its strangest qualities. Money may be imaginary, but the emotions it stirs are real. Now picture a wealthy merchant, centuries ago, counting gold in a brightly lit room. He feels powerful, secure, envied. His neighbors see his wealth and attach meaning to it: status, success, influence. But behind his smile is the same uncertainty. He wonders if tomorrow will bring disaster, if his fortune will hold, if wars or markets will strip it away. Money creates the illusion of security, but it can also become a prison of worry. Whether rich or poor, people carry money's shadow in their minds. In the modern world, money's psychological weight has only grown. Advertising whispers constantly that happiness is just one purchase away. Social media shows lives drenched in luxury, shaping desires, stirring envy. People compare, measure, and chase, often without noticing how deeply money has infiltrated their sense of self. The strange history of money is not only written in ledgers and treaties, It is written in feelings of inadequacy, in hopes of dignity, in the restless pursuit of enough. Think of the word wealth. At its root, it once meant well-being, health, wholeness. Over time, it became tied to accumulation, to numbers, to accounts. Yet deep down, the old meaning still flickers. People chase wealth not only for luxury, but for peace, for stability, for the ability to rest without fear. And in that sense, the story of money is the story of longing for safety in a fragile world. As money evolved, so did the systems built to control it. Governments tax, banks lend, corporations invest, charities redistribute. Every institution bends around the gravitational pull of money. Even schools, hospitals, temples, and charities need it. Without money, they cannot function. And so, money does not sit outside human life, it sits at its very core, binding everything together. Now imagine markets buzzing in real time, numbers flickering on screens across the globe. Traders in New York, London, Tokyo, moving billions with a click. News breaks, and markets shiver instantly. A speech, a rumor, a tweet, and money moves like a storm. These invisible flows affect pensions, mortgages, groceries. The vast ocean of finance connects to the small pond of each household. A storm in one corner of the world ripples into every home. That is how deeply money rules life. Pause for a moment and reflect on your own encounters with these storms. Perhaps you saw prices rise at the store, or worried about savings during a downturn. Perhaps you felt relief when markets recovered. Without realizing it, you are tied to the great web of global money, your life moving in rhythm, with waves you cannot see. That is why this history matters, because it is not just about kings and bankers, it is about you. Money has also ruled through scarcity. Consider times of crisis, wars, famines, depressions. When money tightens like a fist, breadlines stretch, currencies collapse, savings evaporate. People barter once again, trading labor for food, possessions for survival. These moments remind us that money is fragile, but they also remind us of resilience. Communities find ways to adapt, to keep life moving, even when the currency fails. Yet as soon as stability returns, money reclaims its throne. It always returns, because no system has replaced it. Reflect now on the paradox of freedom. People say money gives freedom, and in many ways it does. It allows choices, opportunities, movement. But to earn it, many give up freedom. They sell hours, energy, creativity, sometimes health. They trade freedom for the possibility of freedom later. This is one of money's oldest tricks. It promises liberation while binding people with obligations. And yet most accept the bargain because the alternative feels impossible. Think again of debt, stretching like an invisible thread through lives and generations. A student borrows to study, binding the future to the past. A family borrows to buy a home, tying decades of work to a single decision. A nation borrows to fight a war. Its citizens repays citizens repaying, long after the cannons fall silent. Debt is both possibility and prison. It creates tomorrow, but it also traps tomorrow. The financial crisis of 2008 revealed this paradox brutally. Families who believed in the dream of home ownership discovered that their promises were built on sand. Banks collapsed under the weight of their own illusions. Markets tumbled, governments scrambled, and ordinary people carried the scars. Yet slowly, as always, confidence returned. The same system, bruised but not broken, carried on. Because it had to, because money is not something people can walk away from. It is the air of modern life. Now consider technology once more. Mobile phones, digital wallets, instant payments. A farmer in Africa receives payment from a buyer in Europe within minutes. A worker sends money to family across oceans instantly. Distance and borders dissolve in the flow of digits. Money has become not only invisible, but immediate. This speed has created opportunities, but also new risks. Markets move faster, crises spread quicker, illusions inflate and burst in hours rather than years. Money has accelerated, but the human heart remains the same, still ruled by hope, fear, desire. And as technology advanced, a new dream emerged: cryptocurrencies. They promised to remove trust from governments and banks, to place it instead in mathematics and code. Transactions would be verified by networks, not by institutions. Supporters hailed it as liberation. Skeptics called it illusion. Fortunes rose and fell with dizzying speed. And yet, the idea remains powerful. It suggests that money can evolve again, can be reinvented, can escape its old masters. Whether this dream will last or fade, only time will tell. Pause here and imagine the future. Will money be paper, metal, digits, or something entirely new? Will it be controlled by governments or by decentralized systems? Will it bring freedom or tighter chains? The answers are uncertain, but one truth is clear. Money will remain. In whatever form, it will continue to rule lives, because trust and belief are eternal companions of humanity. As you breathe slowly and let your thoughts drift, remember how strange it all is that pieces of paper, scraps of metal, glowing digits, or invisible algorithms can command armies, topple governments, and decide whether families eat or starve. That this invisible force has shaped history more than many kings or battles. That it rules your life quietly, every day, in ways you may not even notice. And yet, knowing this can bring a kind of peace. Because once you see money for what it is, belief, trust, illusion, you realize you are not trapped by it in the way you once thought. You live within it, but you can also step back, understand it, and breathe more freely. This story is not over. Not for the world, not for you. Tomorrow you will handle money again. You will earn, spend, save, worry, hope. You will write your own line in its long, strange history. And as you drift into rest, remember, money is nothing, and yet it rules your life. The strange history of money stretches further still, weaving its way into the 21st century and into every corner of modern life. Think about how often you encounter money in a single day. You wake in the morning and check your phone, perhaps looking at your bank balance or the price of something you wish to buy. You step outside. You see advertisements promising joy if only you spend. You work. You exchange hours of your life for digits added to an account. At night, you pay for food, entertainment, shelter. Each moment, money is there, shaping your choices. It is not loud, not visible, but it whispers constantly. The digital age has amplified this whisper. In earlier times, money passed hand to hand in the form of coins or notes. You could see it leave you, feel its weight, watch it change possession. Now it flows silently. A tap of a card, a click of a button, a wave of a phone. Value moves invisibly, instantly, across continents. You may not even notice it, but the system notices. Banks, governments, corporations, all trace these flows, mapping the movements of billions. The old intimacy of money has vanished. Now it is data, pure and abstract. Consider how this has changed the human mind. When you spent coins, you felt the loss. When you hand over paper notes, you see them shrink from your wallet. But when you tap a card, when you click online, you feel nothing. The numbers shift silently, and because it is invisible, spending becomes easier. Studies show people spend more when paying digitally, because the pain of parting with money is dulled. In this way, money's evolution has reshaped human behavior, not just economies. Think also of how global money now island. In the past, currencies stayed mostly within borders. Today, they roam. An investor in Singapore buys shares in an American company. A student in Brazil pays tuition in Europe. A worker in the Philippines sends wages to family in another country. Trillions flow daily, creating opportunities, but also fragility. A tremor in one market can send shockwaves worldwide. The story of money has become a single global tale, binding billions together in invisible threads. And in this global system, inequality has grown. Some accumulate vast fortunes, unimaginable in scale. Others struggle to survive. Despite working constantly, money concentrates, pools, and builds empires of wealth that rival governments. This is not new. The rich have always existed, but the scale is unprecedented. A handful of individuals now control more wealth than entire nations. Their choices ripple across economies, shaping lives far beyond their sight. Money has become not only a ruler of individuals, but of entire worlds. Reflect for a moment on your own desires. You may long for more money, believing it will bring freedom, comfort, peace, and perhaps it will, for a time. But notice how the desire itself is endless. Once achieved, it shifts. A higher salary brings relief, but soon new desires arise. A bigger house, a better car, more security. Money dangles promises like stars just out of reach. This endless pursuit is part of its strange power. It keeps people moving, striving, working. Without it, economies might stall. With it, people never stop chasing. Now, imagine crises in the modern world. A pandemic spreads, economies halt, businesses close. Governments respond by printing unprecedented amounts of money, by supporting citizens and companies. For a time, this softens the blow, but later, inflation rises, prices climb, trust wavers. Once again, the old pattern repeats. Stretch money in crisis, suffer consequences later. The strange history of money is alive, repeating itself before your eyes. Cryptocurrencies born in this century highlight the desire for something different. People frustrated with governments and banks look to code and algorithms for salvation. Bitcoin was created not by a nation, but by an anonymous figure. Its supply is limited, its rules written in digital stone. Supporters saw it as freedom, as money without manipulation. Speculators saw it as profit, and prices soared, then collapsed, then soared again. The cycle of hope and disappointment continued. Whether cryptocurrencies will transform the world or remain a curious experiment is unknown, but they show that the human search for trust in money is eternal. If trust fades in one system, people invent another. Pause here and let the thought settle. Money is not permanent, not fixed. It is a story constantly rewritten. Each generation creates its own version, its own illusions, its own trust. The shells of ancient tribes, the coins of empires, the notes of kingdoms, the digits of banks, the codes of blockchains. Each is just a chapter in the same long tale. And your chapter is being written now. Consider how money governs not only trade, but imagination. Writers describe dystopias, where money disappears, where barter returns, where chaos reigns. Others imagine utopias, where money is unnecessary, where abundance makes it obsolete. These visions reflect our deepest feelings about money: fear of losing it, hope of transcending it. Yet in reality, money endures because scarcity endures, because trust is needed, because humans are bound by exchange. Reflect also on the role of money in shaping morality. People debate what is fair: wages, taxes, inheritance. They argue over inequality, over corruption, over greed. Money becomes a lens through which justice and injustice are measured. Entire political movements rise around these debates, promising reform, equality, opportunity. And yet, the debates never end, because money itself magnifies differences. It lifts some, it leaves others behind. Its strange history is also a history of conflict, of endless struggle over who should have how much. Now think of the future once more. Imagine a world where cash no longer exists, where every transaction is digital. Governments can track, companies can analyze, algorithms can predict. Convenience is total, but so is surveillance. Will people accept this trade? Will they choose comfort over privacy, ease over freedom? These are questions that will shape the next chapters of money's tale. Or imagine another possibility: decentralized money gaining strength, communities using their own digital currencies, independent of states. This could fragment economies, empower some, destabilize others. Money could become even stranger, with hundreds of competing systems. Perhaps stability will vanish, or perhaps trust will be reinvented in new ways. Breathe slowly and notice how this story is not only about the world, but about you. Tomorrow, you will think about money again. You will plan, you will spend, you will worry, you will dream. Money will be there, guiding your steps, whispering in your mind. And perhaps you will see it more clearly now, not as something natural or inevitable, but as something human, fragile, powerful. A story told across centuries, binding billions of lives. Money is strange because it rules without force. It does not need armies, though it funds them. It does not need chains, though it enslaves. It rules because we believe, because we obey its symbols. That is its deepest mystery, and perhaps its greatest trick. As you let these words fade into the quiet of your thoughts, remember this: money is nothing, and yet it rules your life. Its history is your history. Its story is your story. And as the night deepens, you are part of this endless tale, drifting within the current of belief, carried forward by trust, resting in the strange truth that money is both illusion and power, both fragile and eternal. Money's story moves onward, never pausing, never truly ending. As we look toward the future, we see that it is not only about coins, paper, or even digital screens. It is about power, trust, and the human heart. Every generation believes it understands money, yet every generation discovers new surprises, new crises, new illusions. And so, the tale continues, shaping tomorrow even as we rest tonight. Imagine a child being born today. That child will grow up in a world where physical cash may be rare, perhaps even gone. Their first experience of money may be a number on a phone, a digital allowance transferred instantly. They will never feel the weight of coins in a pocket, never count paper notes under a blanket, never save in jars. Instead, money will be light, invisible, ever-present, an extension of technology itself. For them, this will be normal, but for us, it seems strange. And one day, they too will see their own system change, and they will call it strange as well. This is the cycle. Money is always shifting, always reinventing, always strange. Reflect on how fragile money is, and yet how indestructible. It collapses in crises, only to return in new forms. It betrays trust, only to demand trust again. It vanishes in one hand, only to appear in another. This resilience is not because of its substance, but because of our need. Humans need exchange. They need trust. They need systems to link lives together. Money, whatever form it takes, fulfills that need. Consider also how money shapes culture. Languages carry words for wealth, for poverty, for trade. Proverbs warn of greed. Stories celebrate fortune. Myths explain prosperity. Religions speak of generosity, of charity, of the dangers of attachment to riches. Art depicts coins, jewels, treasures. Songs tell of hunger for gold, for success, for luxury. Money is not just in markets, it is in the human imagination. It has inspired hope, envy, ambition, despair. Its strange history is written not only in ledgers, but in poems and paintings, in prayers and curses. Now picture the global stage today. Nations compete not only with armies, but with currencies. Wars are fought not only with weapons, but with sanctions, with financial blockades, with control over trade. Power lies not only in territory, but in the ability to influence money's flows. The dollar, the euro, the yuan, each is more than a currency. It is a tool of influence, a symbol of dominance. And behind each are people, living daily lives, their groceries and wages tied to these vast struggles. Money links the grand and the ordinary, the global and the intimate, in ways that few forces can. Pause and think of the paradox of abundance. Today, the world produces more wealth than ever before. Technology creates efficiency. Trade spans continents. Resources are abundant. And yet, inequality grows. Many have more than they could ever spend, while many struggle for basic needs. Money distributes unevenly, and with it, opportunity distributes unevenly. This is one of its strangest qualities. It could provide enough for all, and yet it does not. The system of belief and trust that holds money together also magnifies gaps, creating a world both rich and poor at once. Now consider the possibility of a world without money. Philosophers and dreamers have imagined it. A society where abundance makes exchange unnecessary, where people give freely, where resources are shared. Some experiments have tried, communities have formed, but none have lasted long. Without money, coordination falters, trust weakens, systems collapse. Perhaps someday technology will create such abundance that money is obsolete. But for now, and for the foreseeable future, money remains. Strange, flawed, powerful, necessary. As you drift deeper into rest, let these thoughts become lighter. Imagine walking through the long corridors of history, past markets of shells, past counters of coins, past desks of bankers writing notes, past vaults of gold, past glowing screens of digits, past the algorithms of code. Each is a doorway, each a chapter, each part of the same long story. And at the end of the corridor is a mirror, reflecting your own face. Because money's history is not separate from you, it is your history as well. Think of your own life again. The first time you earned money, perhaps from a small job, perhaps from helping at home, the thrill of holding it, the sense of independence. Think of the first time you saved, placing coins in a jar, notes in a wallet, numbers in an account. Think of the first time you spent, trading it for something you wanted. Each of these moments felt simple, but each tied you to centuries of history. You were participating in an ancient ritual, one that has ruled humanity for millennia. And now, as you breathe slowly, you realize that this ritual is endless. Tomorrow you will earn, spend, save, give, or receive again. Each act will be another page in the story, and though you cannot escape money, you can understand it. You can see it not as a mysterious force beyond your grasp, but as a creation of human minds, fragile and powerful. That knowledge brings calm, because it shows that money is not magic, it is not destiny, it is not eternal. It is simply trust. Trust written into symbols, trust shared by billions, trust that can change. Let this thought soothe you. Money rules your life, but only because you and others allow it to. It is nothing by itself, yet everything when believed. It is a dream made solid, a whisper made real, a story made law. And though you must live within it, you are also more than it. You are not the numbers in your account, not the coins in your hand, not the debts you owe. You are the one who lives, who breathes, who dreams beyond them. As this long part of the story closes, rest in the quiet knowledge that you have walked through centuries in your imagination. You have seen money in its many forms, from shells to coins, from paper to plastic, from digits to code. You have seen its power and its fragility, its cruelty and its gifts. You have seen how it rules and why it rules. And now, as night deepens, you can let the story fade, knowing it will continue tomorrow and the day after and for generations to come. Close your eyes, breathe slowly, and let yourself drift. The strange history of money is vast, but tonight you have traveled through it. Tomorrow it will continue, in new forms, in new chapters. But for now, let the story rest. Let yourself rest. Let money's whispers grow distant, like echoes fading into the dark. And as you slip into sleep, remember one last time, money is nothing, and yet it rules your life. Money has always been both a mirror and a mystery, reflecting human hopes while hiding its true nature. As we enter the last part of this long journey, we step away from the clatter of coins and the glow of screens, and instead drift into deeper reflections. What does money truly mean to us? Why has it ruled our lives for so long? And what might the future hold? These questions are not merely economic, they are philosophical, spiritual, even personal. Because money, strange as it is, touches every corner of existence. Imagine standing on the edge of history, looking back across millennia. You see shells passed from hand to hand, coins gleaming in Roman marketplaces, paper notes exchanged in dimly lit shops, digital numbers flickering on screens. Each form of money was once revolutionary, each was once doubted, and each became normal. What seems strange to one generation becomes ordinary to the next. This reveals something profound. Money itself is not fixed, but endlessly reinvented. It is a story that adapts to the needs and beliefs of its time. But deeper than the forms lies the constant of trust. Whether carved into metal, printed on paper, or coded into algorithms, money lives only if people believe in it. If they stop believing, it collapses. This makes money fragile, yet also powerful beyond measure. It rules without armies. It commands without chains. Its force lies not in violence, but in imagination. Few forces in history have matched this strange combination of fragility and strength. Think of the philosophers who tried to understand money. Aristotle wrote of its purpose as a medium of exchange, a measure of value, a store of wealth. Adam Smith described it as the lubricant of markets, allowing specialization and trade. Karl Marx saw it as a mask, hiding the exploitation of labor. John Maynard Keynes viewed it as a link between present and future, connecting today's work with tomorrow's consumption. Each thinker, in their own way, recognized money's central role, yet none could fully capture its mystery. Because money is not only an economic tool, it is a human invention, woven into the fabric of dreams and fears. Pause for a moment and reflect on your own feelings about money. Does it bring you comfort or anxiety? Do you see it as a friend or an enemy, a goal or a burden? Most people feel both at once. They long for more, yet fear its absence. They see it as freedom, yet also as chains. This paradox lies at the heart of money's rule. It promises security, yet it often creates worry. It offers opportunity, yet it demands sacrifice. It is illusion, yet it feels more real than almost anything else. Consider how money shapes time itself. People trade their hours for wages, measuring life in shifts and salaries. Time becomes money, and money becomes time. A worker saves for retirement, buying years of rest in the future with labor in the present. A family borrows for a home, pulling future earnings into the present to create stability today. Nations borrow for wars or infrastructure, binding generations yet unborn to debts not of their making. Money stitches past, present, and future together in ways that few other forces can. It is not only a medium of exchange, it is a medium of time. Now think of how money shapes identity. People are judged by their wealth, their status measured in possessions, their value assumed from income. Entire cultures celebrate wealth as a sign of success. Yet beneath the surface, people know that money is not the same as worth, that a rich person can be cruel and a poor person noble. Still, the illusion persists. Money paints reputations, builds images, creates envy. Social hierarchies, once based on birth or strength, are now often based on wealth. Money has replaced many old markers of power, becoming the universal measure of success. And yet, money is also deeply unequal. Some are born into abundance, others into scarcity. The gap shapes destinies long before individuals can act. A child born into wealth inherits education, connections, security. A child born into poverty inherits struggle, limitation, risk. Money thus magnifies luck, creating worlds apart within the same society. Philosophers and leaders have struggled with this injustice, proposing redistribution, welfare, charity, taxation. Yet the gap persists, and may even grow, because money, by its nature, tends to accumulate. It pools like water, flowing to where it already is, leaving dry places drier. Reflect again on the future. New forms of money are emerging even now. Central banks explore digital currencies. Governments debate regulation of cryptocurrencies. Corporations create their own tokens and points. In the near future, you may carry no cash, no card, only a device, or perhaps even nothing at all, with identity itself serving as currency. Transactions may become seamless, instant, invisible, but with this convenience may come new risks. Surveillance, control, dependency on systems you cannot see or understand. Money may become more abstract, but its grip may tighten further. Pause and breathe. Imagine a world where every purchase is recorded, every transfer logged, every account monitored. Some would call it safety, others a loss of freedom. Would people accept such a world for the sake of convenience? History suggests yes. Again and again, people have traded privacy for ease, autonomy for security. Money's future may be no different. But there may also be other paths. Communities might create their own currencies, local or digital, fostering independence. Cryptocurrencies may evolve, stabilizing into widely trusted systems. Or perhaps entirely new concepts of value will emerge, linked to reputation, to contribution, to sustainability. The future of money is open, uncertain, and inevitably strange. Now consider your own future. You will continue to live with money, to make choices shaped by it. But you may also see it differently now. Instead of being ruled unconsciously, you may watch more carefully. You may see its illusions for what they are. You may remember that money is trust, nothing more. This knowledge does not free you from money, but it frees you from blindness. And in that clarity, there is a kind of peace. Think again of the phrase we began with. Money is nothing, and yet it rules your life. Let it echo softly. It is nothing because it has no inherent substance. It is everything because it commands behavior, shapes dreams, builds civilizations. Holding this paradox in your mind is like holding a coin in your hand. One side is emptiness, the other is power. Together they form the strange whole. As you let these thoughts settle, remember that you are part of this long history. You are not outside it, not separate. Every payment you make, every coin you touch, every number you type is another stitch in the fabric. You are writing the next line of the story. And someday, when others look back, your chapter will be part of the tale of how money, fragile and powerful, ruled our lives. Long before money existed, people lived by trade. Imagine a small village thousands of years ago, perhaps in Mesopotamia, where one farmer grows barley, another raises goats, another shapes clay into jars. When one needs what another has, they make a deal. A jar for some grain, a sack of barley for a goat. It works, but not always. What if the goat herder does not need grain? What if the potter already has too many jars? What if what you want cannot be divided, like half of an animal? Trade by barter is simple, but also clumsy, weighed down by mismatched needs. Out of this frustration, the first seeds of money were planted. At first, almost anything could serve. In some places, it was cattle, large and valuable. In others, it was grain, easy to divide and measure. Salt, too, was precious enough to serve as currency. It preserved food, and armies depended on it. Even the word salary comes from the Latin for salt, because Roman soldiers were at times paid with it. In other regions, cowrie shells, rare and beautiful, were used to buy goods. These shells traveled thousands of miles, traded across Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. To hold one in your hand was to hold trust, because you knew others would accept it in return. Slowly, people realized that money was not about the thing itself, but about agreement. Cows could die, grain could rot, shells could break, but as long as people trusted, they served. This was the first great discovery. Money was not an object, but a story. A story people believed together. Then came the invention that changed everything: coins. Around the 7th century before Christ, in the kingdom of Lydia, in what is now Turkey, rulers began stamping pieces of electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver, with symbols of authority: a lion, a seal, the mark of a king. These little discs carried weight and trust at once. For the first time, money was standardized, official, backed by power. Trade became faster, simpler. A farmer could sell grain, receive coins, and know that those same coins could buy tools from a smith or cloth from a weaver. Imagine the sound of the first coins, ringing as they struck one another, clinking in pouches on belts, piled on wooden tables in markets. That sound became the heartbeat of economies. It spread from Lydia to Greece, from Greece to Rome, and from Rome across Europe and beyond. Coins became not only practical, but symbolic. The face of a ruler stamped into metal was a daily reminder of who held power. Every purchase was also a bow to authority. In Greece, coins carried images of owls for Athens, turtles for Aegina, gods and goddesses for different cities. They were works of art as well as tools of trade. In Rome, emperors minted coins bearing their own faces, spreading their image across the empire. Soldiers carried them. Merchants exchanged them. Peasants saved them. A coin was propaganda, a tiny piece of the state in every hand. But rulers quickly learned another secret. By mixing cheaper metals into coins, they could create more money without finding more silver or gold. At first, it seemed clever, but soon people noticed their coins bought less. Inflation had been born, and with it came mistrust. Stories tell of Roman emperors debasing their currency so much that soldiers demanded payment in kind, in food or land, rather than in worthless metal. The very tool that had built the empire threatened to weaken it. Pause here and imagine a Roman marketplace. The smell of bread baking, the chatter of voices, the clink of coins changing hands. Somewhere in the crowd, a soldier frowns at the new coins in his palm, lighter than before, their shine dull. He knows they will not buy as much as last year. Trust flickers. The empire is strong, but money whispers that nothing lasts forever. Even as coins spread, other forms of money persisted. In China, as early as the Zhou dynasty, bronze objects shaped like tools, spades, knives were used as currency. Later, round coins with square holes in the center appeared, strung together with cords. These strings of coins could be carried like necklaces, a symbol of wealth jangling with every step. Across continents, cultures experimented with forms, but the essence remained the same. Trust turned into symbol. Think now of the Silk Road, that vast web of trade routes connecting east and west. Along its dusty paths traveled silk, spices, glass, ideas, and money. Coins from Rome reached China. Chinese coins reached Persia. Persian coins reached India. A merchant in Samarkand might handle coins from 5 different empires in a single day. Each coin carried a story of its origin. Each was a silent ambassador of distant lands. Money was not only a tool of trade, it was a traveler, binding cultures together. But money's history was never only smooth. Crises came often. Imagine Athens in the time of war, melting down sacred statues for silver to pay soldiers. Imagine Carthage, paying mercenaries who later turned on their employers when payments failed. Money was power, but power could falter, and when it did, chaos followed. Wars ended not only on battlefields, but in treasuries. The side that ran out of money ran out of strength. Even language carries echoes of these times. The word capital comes from the Latin for head of cattle, because wealth was once measured in herds. Pecuniary comes from pecus, meaning flock. Our modern financial words are ghosts of ancient herds and flocks, reminding us that money was once very tangible. To speak of capital today is to echo a shepherd counting animals millennia ago. Pause for a moment and let that thought settle. Every dollar, Every euro, every yen is built on this long story. From cattle to coins, from shells to silver. The money in your pocket is the descendant of a goat traded in Mesopotamia, a coin stamped in Lydia, a denarius passed in Rome. It carries the fingerprints of countless generations, each adding a chapter to the tale. And in all these chapters, one truth repeats: money is trust. Without trust, the shell, the coin, the note is worthless. With trust, it is power. That is why rulers built temples and armies, not only to control land, but to control belief. A coin stamped with a king's face was more than metal. It was a promise enforced by spears and swords. Yet money also carried stories of resistance. In some places, people refused new coins, preferring older, heavier ones. In others, merchants created their own systems, bypassing rulers. Money was a tool, but it was never entirely controlled. It belonged to people as much as to kings. As centuries passed, coins spread further, becoming universal symbols of value. They filled chests of pirates, vaults of kings, purses of peasants. They built roads, funded wars, supported empires, and yet they were always fragile. Empires rose and fell, but the coins remained, silent witnesses to glory and ruin alike. After the age of coins, the story of money took a new turn. Across the great civilizations of the East, something remarkable emerged that would one day change the world: paper money. Imagine the bustling markets of Tang Dynasty China, where silk and porcelain were traded, where spices and precious metals passed through eager hands. For centuries, merchants had carried heavy strings of bronze coins, weighing them down as they crossed mountains and rivers. The inconvenience was obvious. To move wealth across long distances, you needed carts, guards, and endless patience. Out of this problem came a solution so radical that at first it seemed unbelievable. Money made not of metal, but of paper. The earliest versions appeared as promissory notes issued by merchants or local authorities. Instead of carrying sacks of coins, a trader could carry a slip of paper representing a promise of payment. Over time, the government itself began issuing notes, backed by the state's authority. By the Song dynasty, paper money had become widespread. Marco Polo, traveling through China in the 13th century, marveled at this strange invention. In his writings, he described notes made of mulberry bark, stamped with official seals, circulated under threat of punishment for those who refused them. To Europeans, used to the weight of gold and silver, it seemed like sorcery. How could mere paper be trusted? And yet, in China, it worked. Trust had been transferred from the shine of metal to the ink of authority. When paper money finally spread westward, it transformed economies. In medieval Europe, merchants and bankers experimented with bills of exchange letters that promised payment in another city. A trader in Venice could deposit coins with a banker, receive a letter, and travel safely to Paris or Bruges. There, he could present the letter and receive his money, minus a fee. This system reduced risk, encouraged trade, and slowly laid the foundations of modern banking. Families like the Medici of Florence mastered these tools, becoming not only bankers but power brokers, financing kings, popes, and wars. Their letters of credit moved armies as surely as swords did. Behind the Renaissance, behind the art and learning, flowed rivers of money, invisible yet decisive. Picture the grand halls of Florentine banks, clerks hunched over ledgers, quills scratching as they recorded transactions. Merchants from across Europe lined up, speaking in dozens of tongues, each trusting the Medici name more than they trusted their own neighbors. In these quiet rooms, money became more than metal or paper. It became information, written carefully in books, stored in memory, moved by trust in reputations. The bank had become the heart of finance, and finance had become the hidden engine of history. Meanwhile, across the seas, new worlds were being discovered and exploited. Gold and silver poured into Europe from the Americas, hauled on galleons across the Atlantic. The Spanish Empire grew rich on the silver mines of Potosi, where indigenous laborers toiled under horrific conditions. So much silver entered Europe that its value fell, sparking inflation. Prices rose, debts swelled, and people discovered that even precious metals could betray them. Wealth built on conquest carried within it the seeds of instability. In the 17th century, another revolution began: the stock market. In Amsterdam, merchants established the Dutch East India Company, selling shares to investors who hoped to profit from voyages to Asia. For the first time, ownership of a company could be divided into pieces, bought and sold freely. The Amsterdam Stock Exchange became a hub of speculation, excitement, and risk. Investors dreamed of fortunes, and some achieved them. Others lost everything. The very idea of shares, of partial ownership, was strange and thrilling. Money had become not only a medium of exchange, not only a store of value, but a way to bet on the future. This age of speculation brought with it the first great financial bubbles. In Holland, the tulip became a symbol of madness. Rare bulbs were traded for absurd sums, some equal to the price of houses. People believed prices would rise forever, until suddenly they did not. Fortunes evaporated, and the tulip became a cautionary tale, a flower of both beauty and folly. Later, in England, the South Sea bubble inflated with promises of trade riches, only to collapse in ruin. Investors, including nobles and even scientists like Isaac Newton, lost immense sums. Newton himself lamented, "I can calculate the motions of heavenly bodies, but not the madness of men." Money had revealed its strange ability not only to build wealth, but to unleash collective delusion. Pause and imagine walking the streets of Amsterdam during the tulip mania. Traders shout prices, bulbs are passed from hand to hand, contracts are signed with feverish hope. A humble flower becomes the center of an empire of dreams. But then winter comes, contracts are due, buyers vanish, and the empire crumbles overnight. The bulbs, once priceless, are now worthless. What changed? Not the flower, not the ink on the contracts, but the belief. The collective dream dissolved, and with it, the wealth. This pattern of hope inflating and collapsing would repeat endlessly in financial history. Alongside speculation grew institutions of stability. Central banks began to appear, most notably the Bank of England in 1694. Created to manage government debt and stabilize currency, it became a model for others. Its notes carried the weight of the state, promising payment in gold on demand. For centuries, currencies were tied to gold, their value anchored in the precious metal. The gold standard became the bedrock of global finance, ensuring trust across borders. To hold a note was to hold a claim on gold, a promise that could not easily be broken, or so it seemed. The Industrial Revolution transformed money again. As factories spread, as railroads crisscrossed continents, as cities swelled, the need for capital exploded. Banks grew larger, credit expanded, investments multiplied. Ordinary people opened accounts, deposited savings, and took loans. Money seeped into every corner of life, no longer the domain of kings and merchants alone. A worker's wage, saved carefully, became part of the great machinery of finance. Every penny mattered, every pound had weight, not only in pockets but in ledgers stretching across nations. But with growth came crises. The 19th century was marked by panics and crashes, as speculation outran reality, as banks failed, as trust cracked. In America, the Panic of 1837, fueled by land speculation and loose banking, caused widespread ruin. In Europe, railroads collapsed under debt. Again and again, people discovered that money's power was double-edged. It could lift societies to new heights, but it could also drop them into despair. Pause again and reflect. Why did people keep returning to money, even after betrayals? because there was no alternative. Without money, trade collapsed, economies froze, lives grew harder. People forgave, rebuilt, and trusted again because they had to. Money was not optional. It was the lifeblood of the modern world. As the 19th century ended, money's story entered yet another chapter. Global trade surged, empires stretched across continents, and finance grew ever more complex. Insurance, bonds, futures, all emerged as tools to manage risk, to tame uncertainty. Some succeeded, some failed, but all reflected the same truth. Money was no longer just coins or notes. It was promises, contracts, paper, symbols. It was trust, written in ink, flowing invisibly across borders, shaping destinies unseen. And so, by the dawn of the 20th century, the modern world of money had taken shape. Stock markets buzzed, banks flourished, currencies were anchored to gold, and trust seemed secure. Yet beneath the surface, fragility remained. The strange history of money had shown, again and again, that belief could turn to doubt, that stability could become chaos. The world was wealthier than ever, but also more vulnerable than ever. The next crisis was never far away.